Hi, Shannon Waller here, and welcome to the Team Success Podcast. We're talking about the extraordinary coach culture, and one of the reasons why I want to share this with you is it really is a set of our guiding principles that we live by, that we coach our new team members on, that we aspire to, and I think it's just really useful information, particularly with regard to Strategic Coach's team success. So that's why I wanted to share it with you. So we're at number 12, which is called We Walk the Talk. This means that there's an incredible amount of integrity between what we say front stage to our audience, to you, and how people experience things on what we call our backstage, which is everything behind the scenes, everything that we work really hard to do to produce this really awesome front stage that we have. And it's really important because it means that there's an incredibly high degree of trust with both our team members and our clients. It's really fun when Dan Sullivan, co-founder, head coach of Strategic Coach, says something in a workshop. It's validated by the team. Sometimes we have clients who say, Dan said that in the workshop. Is it really true? And we're like, he'll talk about what he does or does not do in the company. He'll talk about the fact that everyone, if you've been here for 3 months or 13 years, gets the same essentially 40 days off a year. So roughly 6 weeks plus 2 weeks of statutory holidays. And they're like, is that really true? And it's like, it certainly is. And the fact that Dan doesn't do any scheduling, as he says, his security clearance doesn't go that high, also completely true. He's very open. He's very clear. He's very transparent. And the clients notice that because they see, for instance, in the workshop, if there's an exercise, it's Dan's sample copy that's up there. You'll see his quarterly plan. You'll see his past, present, and future progress listed out. You'll see his impact filters on his key project. And if you want to know what an impact filter is, please go check out one of our newest books called The Extraordinary Impact Filter, one of the most brilliant thinking tools for being intentional and clear on what it is that you want and want to accomplish. And it's just a great communication tool. Go check that out on strategiccoach.com. In our store, it's well worth it. But my point here is that you get to see what's in Dan's head. There's no mystery. And I think that that's really different. I love it. It's what I think keeps an enormous amount of consistency in an entrepreneurial organization. Now, entrepreneurial organizations are interesting because they're fluid and they're dynamic and things change and people can feel out of the loop. It's also quite different than a corporate organization. And I tend to make an assumption, may or may not be true, that transparency is usually not the name of the game in a large corporate organization. It's a lot about optics. It's a lot about, how things look to somebody else. And what I love about entrepreneurial organizations is the opportunity to be transparent, to be incredibly clear, to be honest is much higher. And so that's one of the things that I personally appreciate about being in an entrepreneurial organization. And if you've had a different experience, please share that with me. I'd like to know that. From my limited experience in corporate, being totally honest was not always a winning strategy. Let me put it that way. So the whole thing about walking the talk, well, why is this so important? Well, this goes back to trust. Trust is a really important factor in teamwork. I was watching a really interesting Simon Sinek video today on the topic, and he talked about the fact that trust is a feeling. It's the result of behaviors on behalf of the company, especially on behalf of leadership, and it determines whether or not people feel like they belong, which I think is a really interesting take. And if you've been doing industry reading lately and you've heard about the Google study, and the Google study is really interesting. And then in some other research that I was doing in preparation for today's conversation, I found an article in Inc. magazine, and here's the title. It's Brain Research Discovered This One Thing is What Makes Work More Productive and Employees Happier. Well, guess what that is? It's trust. Which I think is just a cool thing. And there's a really interesting take on why that's important. And the article, by the way, is by Marcel Schwantes, Schwantes. So I think you'll enjoy reading that. But what it talks about is that there's a doctor named Dr. Zach whose discovery was that trust stimulates in people's brains oxytocin. Now, you may have heard about oxytocin as the feel-good chemical in our brains, and I'm really familiar with it because it's actually what gets stimulated when a mother coos back to its baby and reflects its sounds, reflects its facial expression. It stimulates oxytocin in the brain. It's called the mirror neuron, is another way it gets talked about, and it's immediately calming. In the brilliant book, Just Listen by Mark Goulston, he talks about the same thing, stimulating mirror neurons. And it's so critical because when you can imitate someone's point of view, like, oh, wow, this is really important to you, that you feel like this is really important, that I understand exactly what you're thinking and what you're feeling right now. And that could be whether or not they're happy or upset. You're not actually agreeing with them. You are mirroring when you reflect back their body language. This works really well, by the way, with your kids. Even if you want them to be doing something completely different, if you in fact mirror how they're acting, wow, you're really upset about this right now. They feel understood, they feel heard. And then when that happens, oxytocin gets released and people calm down. If you've ever called the customer service department of a company and you didn't feel heard, oxytocin was not released in your brain. That's what happened. And if the person was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to you. Really? They didn't send it out to you after they promised you did, and there's no record of your conversation. You must be so frustrated. And you're like, exactly. You understand. Thank you. And all of a sudden we start to calm down. This actually happened to my husband last week. So we know this. We've had that experience. And so trust builds this chemical. And it also goes into safety. In a future podcast, I'm going to be talking about the Google survey that discovered that psychological safety is the number one effectiveness trait in teams, which I think is fantastic. And trust is simply another word for psychological safety. So this is something that happens when you, in fact, walk the talk, when people can count on you, when you're trustworthy, when there's a sense of integrity. In our company, we talk about how important free days are. Well, if we talked about it and we coached it front stage with our clients, and a free day is 24 hours, midnight to midnight, during which you do absolutely no work. The purpose of that is rejuvenation. So if we preached that to our clients, we said how great it was, and we helped them track it, and yet our culture backstage was that free days, even though we paid lip service to it, were bad. And that when people took time off, we'd say snide things about them, or that we would kind of malign people who took vacations, like, oh, again, he's not here again. If we had that attitude backstage, that's not walking the talk. Well, at Strategic Coach, we do walk the talk, and people take lots of free days, those 40 days off a year. And those 40 days off do, in fact, include the statutory holidays. So it's really, 6 weeks of discretionary time. It's fantastic. And in fact, I'm leaving shortly on a trip, so I'm super excited about that. And we celebrate that. And we like it when people are rested. We like it when people are rejuvenated. We count on people to be their best selves at work. And we can't do that if we're tired. That makes us cranky. That makes us poor communicators. It certainly does not lend itself to creativity. And that's really what it is that we want to build here at Coach. So it's really critical for all of us that we reflect front and backstage what's really true. So I want to leave you with some actions that you can take that will really help build this sense of credibility and consistency within your own company. One of the other ways that trust really shows up is when you are transparent about when things do not go as promised. We are not a perfect organization by any stretch. Sometimes we get too busy, sometimes things fall through the cracks, but we also are very, very honest about them, and we strive to make things better. We'll often, if there's some mistake in the multimedia or in some of our print, or if we messed up a date somewhere, we do our utmost to make it better. We acknowledge that we're not perfect, and we fix it right away. One of the really stellar examples in our history that I kind of always remember is when we had actually designed a software program around one of our key tools called the Pocket Coach. This is how you tracked your free days and your goals and your focus days and your income goals and all sorts of other key kind of metrics, 3-year goals, 1-year goals, 90-day goals. We thought, oh my gosh, it'd be so incredible to actually have software on this. And by the way, this was way before apps, so this was quite a while ago. We spent 7 figures. And that probably would be worth double that at this point in time. And it never got to where we needed to go. It didn't have the look. It didn't have the feel. And we invested a ton of time. The team and I flew down to Chicago, and we were working with the team hands-on, making all those really minute decisions that's required for software development, which is not my unique ability, I learned. And eventually, when the product was developed enough for us to make an assessment about it, we decided it was actually not good enough and not a representation of what we wanted to do with our clients, and we decided to kill the project. After we had invested 7 figures. This was a big decision, and we've been telling our clients about it. It's like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And we drafted and we sent this letter that said, here's the project, here's what happened, here's our decision. Unfortunately, we can't proceed. It does not represent what we are up to. It doesn't have the result that we really wanted for you. So unfortunately, as Dan will joke, we took it out back and shot it. We did away with it. We expect that our clients be really disappointed. We got so many kudos for that letter. And no, I don't have a copy anymore. But they were like, wow, this is the most gracious explanation, apology. I want to model my mistakes after this. And so we actually got a lot of really, really positive feedback, even when we had to admit that we had completely messed up. This big project that we thought was going to be so fabulous wasn't, and it was never going to be good enough, so we killed it. It was kind of an interesting experience because it meant that when we were really honest with our clients and saying, hey, we messed up, the feedback was actually really, really positive. And I like that. To me, it was a good reminder that doing the right thing really does pay off. And people will not blame you or be mad at you or just tolerate you. They'll actually say thank you. I've learned a lot from how you handled this situation. So that just kind of reinforced that really positive behavior. So here's how you can take action on this in terms of walking the talk. And these are things that actually will help you create that trust. And I could go on about leadership and how important it is to do these things. But I actually think if you want to have a great company, everyone needs to do these 4 things. And we call them our referability. I sometimes call them credibility habits. Credibility and trust and confidence all go together. So the first one is to show up on time. So this means looking at your watch, setting your timer a little bit earlier, having reminders, people, what have you. Showing up on time is number 1. Second is doing what you say. And doing what you say is really, really important because it means that people can count on you. You are trustworthy. It's really important that you actually are really consistent. And if you're not someone who remembers everything you said you were going to do, write it down, track it. I love coaching our clients to have a team member come in at the last 10 or 15 minutes of an internal meeting, a client meeting, and say, okay, what are the decisions that we've made? What is it that I can track and make sure that we communicate? And all of a sudden be like, oh, our client will say, oh, well, this, and this, and then their client will add in, oh, and this, and this, and this. It's like, oh, thank goodness there were 2 of us, filling that in. So showing up on time, doing what you say. Number 3 is finishing what you start. And particularly for our clientele at Strategic Coach, we have a lot of starters, and finishing is sometimes really challenging. Now, I personally am very good at finishing things against a deadline. That's when my creativity kicks in. But I also really value and appreciate people who have a natural instinct and talent for finishing. In the Kolbe system, it's called follow through. And check them out at kolbe.com if you're curious as to what I'm talking about. But some people have an instinct for finishing things. In fact, they can't sleep until things are done. They have to check off the list. They can't leave the office until certain things are finished. And you may need someone like that in your life. Perhaps it's your life partner, perhaps it's your colleague, perhaps it's your assistant, whatever. But some of us just need that extra support. And we love to start things, but we don't love to finish them. So if you're not going to be the one to do it, that's fine. Just make sure it gets done. So far we have show up on time, do what you say, finish what you start. And the last one is to say please and thank you. One of the values at Coach, which we've talked about, is graciousness. And just understand that people are doing things for their reasons, not yours. And saying please and thank you is just an acknowledgement that you have a creative person on the other end of that request who has a choice about how they're going to use and direct their energy. So when you're asking, you're acknowledging, that they have a choice in the matter. And when they've done something great for you, to just say thank you. And to have that be a genuine experience is really, really important. One of my clients actually came back and said, my entrepreneur has been writing P and TY at the bottom of memos and emails. And she said, it's really not landing very well. I'm like, oh, that is, if you can't even take the time to write out the entire word, please and thank you. And it's just transactional like that. Of course, it doesn't feel genuine. So emotion and feeling and sincerity has to go behind that. So I want to leave you with these 4 referability, or as I like to call them, credibility habits, because I think if we can walk our talk on those things, first of all, as an individual, as a leader, as a team member, I think all of our organizations will be even much more credible. So I want to leave you with these 4 referability habits because I think if we as leaders, as individuals, as team members really practice these, we will, first of all, display incredible integrity. We'll be incredibly consistent for one another, and we will be all companies that walk our talk. So I hope this is useful for your thinking in terms of your own team success. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know at strategiccoach.com. And as always, here's to your team success. Hi, Shannon here, and thank you very much for listening. If you like what you heard today, please take a moment to rate the Team Success podcast on iTunes. And we'd love it if you'd share the podcast with anyone else who could benefit. If you're interested in learning more about the Strategic Coach program for entrepreneurs, visit us at strategiccoach.com or the Strategic Coach channel on YouTube. For free downloads and more team success strategies, visit teamsuccesshandbook.com.